In Chapter 11 of Amusing Ourselves to Death, entitled The Huxleyan Warning, Neil Postman concludes his book with a return to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Here's a quote from Postman. America is engaged in the world's most ambitious experiment to accommodate itself to the technological distractions made possible by the electric plug. This is an experiment that began slowly and modestly in the mid-19th century and has now, in the latter half of the 20th, reached a perverse maturity in America's consuming love affair with television. As nowhere else in the world, Americans have moved far and fast in bringing to a close the age of the slow-moving printed word and have granted to television sovereignty over all of their institutions. By ushering in the age of television, America has given the world the clearest available glimpse of the Huxleyan future. That's from page 156. Postman refers here to something I've referred to often, the fact that we in the modern world find ourselves in a mass social experiment that we have not opted into. Postman refers in particular to all of those things connected to electricity, television, radio, lights, air conditioning, computers, etc. It's not only electricity, however, that contributes to this experiment. Anything powered by an engine of any kind, the automobile, airplane, train, etc., should also be included, and many other things, certainly. Ultimately, one could include most inventions of the past 300 years or so, as well as the ecosystem that these new inventions have created. What is it in particular that these inventions have accomplished? At least one thing that they have accomplished is to empower humans to have a massive effect on the world around us, an effect previously unimaginable and only possible through the use of powerful levers. The idea of the lever is a crucial one to understand. Modern inventions make it possible for one man to do the work of 10 or more men, for example. This kind of productivity is difficult to ignore, especially when the financial incentives for taking advantage of this productivity are so great. In the modern era, it's always been the case that the incentives for new technology have been so great that no attempt to justify new technology has been necessary. When confronted with a new technology, the kinds of questions that one usually asks are, does it work? Does it make my life easier? Does it save me money? Etc. These are utilitarian questions focused on the usefulness of a technology. The problem with these kinds of questions is that they are short-sighted and do not take into account the bigger picture. If we care about the world we live in and the world that we will pass down to our children, the kinds of questions that we should be asking include, what kind of world does this technology assume or promote? What human activity or capacity does this replace or diminish? Is the gain in efficiency worth what might be lost in the process? And then relatedly, what are the hidden costs? Certainly there are many other similar questions that one could and should ask. These are largely philosophical questions, but ironically, they are also actually utilitarian questions. They simply ask us to view things with a longer timeline. One of the great problems in the modern world is that people's attention spans have diminished substantially. What this means is that we have difficulty taking the long view. We would rather have our convenience and our shiny new objects in the short term rather than waiting or foregoing them completely if it's clear that long term they will have a deleterious effect on people and our society. So based on the above, I'm going to do a quick thought experiment. Maybe it's helpful to provide an example. I'm going to offer some potential answers to one of the philosophical questions from above as related to the smartphone. So, what kind of world does this smartphone technology assume or promote? The smartphone promotes a world where individuals do not need other people, but are greatly dependent on technology. It promotes a world of instant gratification, of continuous surveillance, and of attention as a commodity. The world of the smartphone is one that is superficially connected. The connections that it promotes are disincarnate rather than incarnate, digital rather than analog, fleeting rather than long-term, and individualistic rather than communal. The kinds of connections that it promotes undermine incarnate, analog, long-term, and communal connections. There is, of course, much more that could be said about the kind of world that the smartphone has created. Some potentially positive, but most, I would argue, are negative. But if one were asked if they wanted a world where their connections with other people were increasingly superficial and transitory, where they didn't have need of other people, where they were being continuously surveyed, and where their attention was regarded as a commodity, it's hard to believe that they would answer in the affirmative. This is, of course, a conversation that most of us do not have when considering whether or not to use a smartphone, or at least how to use a smartphone, because most of us do not ask these kinds of critical questions about the technologies that we adopt. So here's a quote from Postman. To be unaware that a technology comes equipped with a program for social change, to maintain that technology is neutral, to make the assumption that technology is always a friend to culture, is at this late hour stupidity, plain and simple. Moreover, we have seen enough by now to know that technological changes in our modes of communication are even more ideology-laden than changes in our modes of transportation. Introduce the alphabet to a culture, and you change its cognitive habits, its social relations, its notions of community, history, and religion. Introduce the printing press with movable type, and you do the same. Introduce speed of light transmission of images, and you make a cultural revolution. Without a vote, without polemics, without guerrilla resistance. Here is ideology, pure, if not serene. Here is ideology without words, and all the more powerful for their absence. All that is required to make it stick is a population that devoutly believes in the inevitability of progress. And in this sense, all Americans are Marxists, for we believe nothing if not that history is moving us toward some preordained paradise, and that technology is the force behind that movement. It's from pages 157 and 158. So, as one considers the important changes of the past few hundred years, one continually encounters this persistent myth that human culture is progressing and that human progress is inevitable. As attention spans decrease, it becomes easier and easier to convince people that technological novelty necessarily results in social and human progress. If one zooms out, however, this connection can be shown to be completely baseless. To again take one example, the smartphone. While an impressive invention, it does nothing to improve the actual condition of humans. On the contrary, has anyone made a compelling argument that humans in 2025 are better off than humans were in 2005 because of the smartphone? Actual human progress should strengthen human capacities. The ability to walk rather than to crawl, for example. Another example would be the use of the human mind to navigate the world using acquired knowledge and memory of geographical location, landmarks, the sun, and any other points of reference that improve one's navigational capacities. The GPS does the opposite. It weakens one's innate and developed navigational capacities, and instead makes one dependent on an electronic grid that can be easily compromised, and that is itself completely dependent on a larger network of technologies that are themselves easily compromised. The normative view is one of tech optimism. This optimism, however, is predicated on a system that is out of our control and that we naively believe will always be there. One of the many problems with the myth of progress is that it has never been clearly defined. It's a vague concept that our culture has come to regard as a truth in the same way that it regards the truth of gravity. Why is this? At least part of the reason is likely because it is a very convenient faith system. If we blindly believe in the myth of progress, we can partake of the fruits of science and technology without the anxiety that asking philosophical questions about these fruits might engender. Intuitively, we all know that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, but the apple that we have been offered is too attractive to pass up. The myth of progress provides us with a seemingly scientific and rational cover for our anxieties. And here's one last quote from Postman. It's a little bit of a Franken quote. An Orwellian world is much easier to recognize and to oppose than a Huxleyan world. In any case, the point I am trying to make is that only through a deep and unfailing awareness of the structure and effects of information, through a demystification of media, is there any hope of our gaining some measure of control over television or the computer or any other medium. Thus, there are near insurmountable difficulties for anyone who has written such a book as this, and who wishes to end it with some remedies for the affliction. In the first place, not everyone believes a cure is needed, and in the second, there probably isn't any. In the end, he, Aldous Huxley, was trying to tell us that what afflicted the people in Brave New World was not that they were laughing instead of thinking, but that they did not know what they were laughing about and why they had stopped thinking. And those quotes are from pages 156 through 163. I wanted to get them all in here because I think they're all wonderful and helpful. So that is Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. Thank you so much for joining me these past months as we went through it. I'm sorry there were some hiccups in the process, but for those of you who have been stuck with me, thank you very much. And for those of you who joined at the end, thank you as well. I do hope to do more of these book studies, and hopefully in the future there'll be more interaction on the Substack. So if you haven't already subscribed to the Substack, please do so. There's a link below this video. Subscribe to the channel, as always. And if you haven't downloaded the How Did We Get Here reading list for even more great books that dive into many of these issues, please sign up for the newsletter and download the reading list. It's been a lot of fun. I really, really love this book. Eventually, we'll look at Technopoly as well, which is another one of Postman's wonderful books. I'm not sure what the immediate future has, but we will continue in some form to continue to look at these questions. And really glad to have you along for the ride, as always. Have a great weekend, and we will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.